Welcome back, I'm Kimberly, and this is Floral Art Online, the Designs Dissected series, where we ask our AI, DesignEye, to give us the benefit of some independent assessment and analysis of a design. These are all ones that I have used in the past to give us, based on the principles and elements of design, some assessment of what the design is doing right, and then some suggestions of what we could do to improve the design, once again in terms of those principles and elements of design. This week we're looking at a collage. This is from a number of years ago. I will say that this particular collage was awarded first place in the competition. The title was Floral Gatherings, and as you can see, the sizing was 80 centimetres high, 60 centimetres width, and it was staged on an easel as opposed to sometimes being staged on a wall, so you have to hang it as well. What I wanted to do with this was explore some split collages, so not always have the collage on a straight flat backing, and you'll see in some of the other analysis that has been done through DesignEye, I've used circles, I've used other shapes, and trying to just experiment with the way the backing looks in terms of a collage. So obviously a collage, by its very nature and its definition, is something that is glued. So you can use fresh and dried material in this particular competition. So I've mostly used dried. There is some fresh material that doesn't need a water source, so it is glued on to the backing. So the backing came from a charity store. It was 3 pieces, but the third piece made it too tall for the competition. And so I actually did try and remove the connectors between the 2 pieces because I wanted to put something else in there, some more plant material, but I couldn't get them apart. And so I've wrapped them in yellow wool, and that repeats the colour of the craspedia that is placed throughout the design. I've used a dried strelitzia leaf in the top section that is curled over on itself, and it's got some banksia glued onto the inside of it, and then some dried agapanthus flower heads. What I've tried to do is continue that plant material through the design, so it's coming from the top, a little bit of a flourish at the top and coming into a spiral in the bottom. I've got another strelitzia leaf in the bottom half, and then a range of other dried material that is complementary in terms of its colour and contrasting in terms of its texture. But I was really interested in exploring that spiral shaping, bringing that movement down from the top section to the bottom section. I didn't quite get the spiral as round as I would like, but I was happy with the interpretation. When I look at it now, there are some things that I would do differently. But let's see what DesignEye has got to say for us. Firstly, about its analysis in terms of the principles and elements of design, and then what it suggests that we might do to improve the design. With the elements of design, first of all, we'll look at line. The design employs a combination of curved and straight lines to guide the viewer's eye. The curved lines in the lower panel create a sense of flow and movement, while the straighter lines in the top panel offer a more structured contrast. The interplay between organic and geometric lines adds visual interest and diversity. That's probably a bonus. I don't mind the straight lines in the top half, the painted lines that are on the background, but I think when I look at it now, it's a little bit of it jars me a little bit to look at it, and I think perhaps they're just too dark, and I should have maybe covered them up with some plant material. So I still had those lines, but covered them up with some plant material to enhance the top section of the design. Once again, in the elements of design, we're looking at shape and form. Organic shapes dominate the design, seen in the natural forms of the botanical elements and the spiral motif in the lower panel. These shapes evoke a sense of nature and balance. The curved crescent and spiral forms anchor the composition, providing a focal point for the viewer. So that's very much what I wanted to do. I wanted you to be drawn down to the bigger section, the bottom half of the design, but not to have the top be forgotten. So that's why it's got the strelitzia leaf that has a little bit of a flourish and a curl, so that you actually start your you travel through the design at that point and come down to the spiral in the bottom. In elements of design, we're looking at colour. The neutral colour palette of creams, greens, yellows and browns reflects an earthy and harmonious theme. Yellow accents provide small bursts of vibrancy that draw the attention to key areas without overpowering the composition. And this is one of the areas when I'm looking at it now that I think it needs improvement. The green that is painted on the background is quite dominant to my eyes, and the red, and I haven't really repeated that anywhere else in the design. I haven't used that green or the red anywhere else in the design. There's a little bit of red in the bottom right hand corner, but it's not the same vibrancy of red as is in the top section. So had I covered up those lines, as I mentioned earlier, with some plain material, or had I incorporated a bit more green in the spiral in the bottom, so perhaps making the spiral out of, it's made out of jute string and jacaranda foliage string. If I'd made it out of yucca leaves, it'd be greener, and so that green would carry through to this bottom section of the design. For elements of design, we're looking at texture now. A variety of textures is present, from the smooth painted background to the rough tactile quality of dried plant material. This contrast enhances the visual and tactile interest of the piece. The inclusion of spiky and soft botanical forms adds another layer of texture, contributing to the depth of the design. All of that's very good, because particularly if you're using a pre-bought or pre-prepared backing, you're going to start with a very smooth surface. So you need to ensure that there is a contrast of textures in whatever it is that you're gluing onto that background. And the easy thing, particularly with foliage, is that you have another smooth and sometimes shiny surface, and so we've still got to look for the texture that's going to break up and give contrast to your design. Elements of design, again, for space. The design utilises negative space within both panels effectively, allowing the eye to rest and preventing the composition from feeling overcrowded. The spacing between the two panels and the use of open areas within each panel provide a sense of balance. When I look at it now, I would actually like a bit more space between those two panels, and had I been making the panels rather than using something that was pre-existing and been able to adjust it a bit more, I probably would have had perhaps double the space that is in between those two now. And so I would be given the opportunity to have something that really connected those two areas. But I'm happy with the use of the negative space, because you don't think of it as blank space, you think of it as part of the design, just as it says, an area where your eyes can rest before it moves on to the next thing. So let's now look at some principles of design. The first one is balance. The design achieves asymmetrical balance with heavier visual weight concentrated in the lower panel due to the spiral motif and denser clustering of materials. The lighter, more open top panel creates a sense of contrast and counterbalance, and that was fairly important because it was very easy to make that bottom section quite visually dominant and quite visually heavy. So having the strelitzia leaf at the top there and have it extending out past the edge of the panel itself, which I could do because I was still in the sizing restrictions that we were using, brings your eye up higher to that area. And I like the idea of making the area a complete statement in itself, even though it's in two sections, as you can see. So the balance is there to make it feel like it is a complete unit rather than two separate units. So principles of design now, the emphasis. The focal point is the spiral in the lower panel, which naturally draws the viewer's attention due to its dynamic shape and clustering of textures and colours. Secondary emphasis is placed on the crescent shape in the upper panel, which complements the spiral while adding variation. So all of the things that I just talked about in terms of emphasis and balance in a design means that there are areas that you're drawn to, but that doesn't mean you stop there. You still want to move through and see other things, and it's easy for your eye to do that because the rhythm is there, or the repetition is there. So looking in the principles of design at unity and harmony, The repetition of botanical elements such as seed pods and flowers across both panels creates cohesion. The limited colour palette and recurring natural textures tie the two panels together, creating a unified design. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted it to feel like one design, as I have said just a few minutes ago, but I needed it to be separate, to create a little bit of drama and a little bit of tension in the design without pulling your eyes away from the design itself. So another principle of design is movement. The curved lines and spirals guide the viewer's eye smoothly through the composition, particularly from the top panel to the bottom. This creates a sense of dynamic movement. The spiral in the lower panel evokes a centripetal motion, pulling the viewer's gaze inward, which is interesting because that is what I wanted to do, but I didn't think that I got the spiral evenly spaced enough to be able to make that happen. So it's good that an independent viewer can look at that and see that that's what it's doing. And the last principle of design that we want to look at is proportion. The size of the elements is well scaled to the overall composition. However, the lower panel feels more visually dominant, which may overshadow the subtler elements in the top panel. And I think that's very true. I think that I could have spaced that spiral out more, not had quite as much material hanging off it. But I'd have to be careful with the background because the background's so light. I need to make some sort of statement in that panel. So let's now see what the suggestions are. I know what I would do if I was doing this design again, so let's see what the suggestions are for us. First of all, enhance the top panel. The top panel could benefit from slightly more visual weight or complexity to balance it with the lower panel. For example, adding additional layers of texture or botanical forms. Have to be really careful with that because it's a smaller overall space. I don't want it to look like it's two halves of a design, and I think that perhaps what I should have done is just had a spiral at the top rather than that smaller and relying on the strelitzia leaf to give you the idea of the spiral. I should have just had a smaller spiral in the top, that top corner, so it was going from small spiral to big spiral. Strengthen the transition between the panels. The connection between the two panels could be made more seamless by introducing a visual element, a thread or vine that physically or visually links the two sections. So I've talked about that before. I would like the space to be a little bit bigger, and I would like it to be, as I said, I wanted it to have the cruspedia in there because that was going to be the connector between the two elements. So I think that would have given the transition between the two, and perhaps what I would have done is had where the rods are, I would have had the cruspedia there, but I would have had it so that the line joined the spiral lines so that it looked like the cruspedia was coming down from the top, got caught in between the two panels, but then continued into the next panel down the bottom. Introduce subtle colour variations. I think this is the thing that struck me when I looked at this image when I was putting it up to DesignEye to have the analysis done, is that it just needs more colour. It's just for me, there's just not enough impact with the colour. So incorporating soft accents of complementary colours, lavender or muted blue, could add depth and sophistication without disrupting harmony. And that's an interesting thing for us to remember, is that yes, we could put colour in it, but it will disrupt the harmony of the design if it's too bright, if it's too much of a contrast. So having colours that subtly move you through that end of the colour spectrum is more important than just having the pops of colour that would create too much disruption. So layering for depth, adding additional layers, raised elements or shadows could create a more immersive three-dimensional effect. It's a little bit hard with the image here to see actually how three-dimensional this was. That's a very important part of a collage, is to make sure that it is three-dimensional, that you do come out from a reasonable distance from the backing, and that there are shadows that play into the design, because the shadows form part of the design for the judges. When they're looking at it, it enhances the depth, obviously. They can see that there's depth there, and that helps them to see that it is a complete design in all its dimensions. So some really good suggestions there. Even though this was placed first, there's always things that you can do, and things when you look at a design that you would like to do differently. So this process enhances our education so much. If you would like to have one of your designs analysed through our AI DesignEye, all you need to do is go to the website, upload your image. In about 24 hours, you'll have your analysis back exactly like this one is. Each of those analyses is looked at by a human judge before it's sent out to you, just to make sure that it makes sense, and that the AI, as we know now, hasn't had some hallucinations in what it's telling you, which I haven't experienced in all of the time that I've been doing this with all sorts of designs. But we do check, so be reassured that we do check, and that you're getting the best possible information you can to enhance your designs, improve your designs, and enjoy your floral art journey. So until next time, I'm Kim Bailey. This is Floral Art Online, the Designs Dissected series.